All right, gentlemen. I believe we are live. That's what the little counter says. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. What a great day. First day back from the
Right.
holidays, all rested or supposedly rested. I don't know if the holidays was the rest or coming back from the holidays is the rest. I'm still not sure. But
I'm not rested, but I'm going to be recharged talking to you all today. And I'm excited. This is live, people. This is not pre-recorded, and we put it out on Monday of December 29th. We're here. We're live. So,
Yep.
feel free to chime in and comment. I'm excited to be with you guys today.
This is great.
Yeah, this is a bit of a reboot for Adam and I. We did the Beyond the Binder about a year and a half ago, and coming back with today's episode, The Standard Advantage: Why Independent GMs Must Tighten Execution in 2026, with our friend Steve Turk, who a lot of you know, hospitality advisor, spent years helping independents compete at the highest level, and you probably know Adam, Yipy Co-Founder and CEO. So 2026 is bringing a higher guest expectation, probably rising labor costs for sure. I think I read the other day 2025 is up 9%, maybe something like that. Tougher competition. The hotels that win won't be the ones sitting on the sidelines. Got to tighten execution, and that's what we're here to talk about. So jumping in.
Yeah.
Steve, let's talk about an independent hotel's, they tend to pride themselves on flexibility and personality, right? But where does that mindset start to break down operationally?
It's a really good question, because that's what we see a lot now. That boutique and independent are the hot things in the industry, and everyone's kind of chasing that. You see the big brands buying up those kind of companies and putting it into their fold, and because they like the ethos and they like the lifestyle they've built and they like the marketing they get from them. But it can go sideways quickly, because if you don't have the right people in place and the right standards in place to kind of keep that going as you scale, it starts to fall apart. Even if you only have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 locations, it's a hard thing to do if everyone's not trained on the right processes, because like you said, turnover is high in this industry. You have people coming and going. And if there's not a way to train them up to get them to where the team needs them to be, it can be really detrimental, because you start losing that voice and that vibe that you work so hard to create for that brand. And so it can go sideways as you start to grow, and you're not, the owner GM is not there, and you don't have everyone that knows the core values of what that property should be like and what the feel should be like. You need those champions on property. And if you don't, it gets ugly quick.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think Steve, wow, nail on the head in the fact that if we don't know the standards, I think that's like the critical part. And what's interesting is, Jason, you're asking about how does that blend with a independent hotel versus a really well-known branded hotel. I think when we talk about standards, there's often this idea that standards are this rigid conformity of, oh, this is how you have to behave. And part of the independent value is, oh, we're not that. We're not scripted, right? We're unscripted or we have a more genuine interaction with the guest, which is great. I mean, I'm all for that. I mean, working in my past life at Four Seasons, which I think is prides themselves also on being unscripted, right? But the idea here is that there is the challenge, or I guess we could come back and circle back in that, like Steve was saying, if you don't know the standards, you're a cooked goose in a way. And the reason is the standards really aren't set by the brands. The standards aren't really set by, things, these corporations. When you really look at it, when you get down to the core of it, it's the guests, right? These are the people that are setting the standards. I mean, even when you get to Forbes, and you're looking at, these highly, defined standards, it all comes back to, but this is the guest expectation. And so what happens is if we say, hey, we don't have standards, or, we have this flexibility and this personality, and we have, this ability to, free float, so to speak, if we don't define those standards, and by define that means if we don't truly understand what those guests are looking for, what ends up happening is it turns to inconsistency. It turns to the team or the guest feeling like, man, nice people, but sure depended on who you got, right? Man, it was great. Steve was great, but that Adam guy, he was terrible, right? And that's what we want to avoid. You know, consistency truly is the quality of any hospitality operation, branded or not, independent or not, right? It's about the consistency to deliver amazing service. And I think that that's really where it comes down to.
Yeah, you've talked recently about it really give if you have a system in place, it doesn't have to be, like you said, totally rigorous. It gives you the freedom to be natural. It gives you the confidence. I'm sorry. I think that's what you said, the confidence.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
I think you've heard me say this, like confidence builds competence,
yes.
but also vice versa. Competence builds confidence, right? When we know, gosh, we nailed that check-in. Like I know my standards. I know what to do during this experience, and I did it. Aha. I'm more confident. I'm a happier person. And the people on the receiving side of that are totally going to feel the same thing. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, maybe this is thinking about genuinely, and Steve, you know, would love to hear your thoughts on this, is like, what does a guest really want at check-in? Like, what do you actually want out of a check-in experience? For me, I want to feel like this sense of arrival, like, oh my gosh, I'm here. I also want to feel like, oh my gosh, you've got my stuff, like my stay's all set up. I'm all good. Like I'm at the right hotel at the right dates. My money's paid or it's not paid, right? I got the right room. I mean, I think that really when it comes down to it, there's these core essentials of things that I need to feel in order to feel relaxed. But then I also need to feel some type of connection with the person. I want to feel like, man, my money here was good. I don't know.
Yeah, look, I agree. I agree on some of those things. I also don't want to check in at a front desk, right? I had an experience at Disney not long ago where I was shocked at how well it worked. Like they text me, here's your room number. Your room number is ready. You put your phone up to the door when you're ready to check in. All the stuff I had requested prior for the kids was in the room. So they had thought about me and anticipated my needs. And if I had questions, I was able to go and get those things answered from someone at the front desk. And I really started thinking about that guest journey now as we're building our own first project called Baya in Miami. So if you haven't checked it out yet, check out Baya Miami on Instagram. You can see what we're building. But what is that guest journey like? And we're using some of those hybrid things where you don't need to check in at a front desk, but we're going to have a beautiful cafe and bar. So if you do have questions, those people will be trained up to be able to answer those things as you're on site. Because I think that's part of the guest journey. And the arrival is like, yes, you arrive at a beautiful place. The sense of arrival is great. And then there's a line that you have to wait and check into and then give your credit card and have that question. Is this your first day with us, even though you've stayed 100 times at that place, right? I think that's kind of that first experience where you're ready just to get going and get to your room and set down your things and get rolling. And so, look, I'm talking sideways here. I just think that, yes, it requires, I think, thinking about the guest journey. What do you want that guest to go through? And then building standards to that versus, hey, here's what Forbes says, or here's what Michelin says, and here's what the standards are. Because I've worked with properties now that are 5-star, 5-diamond properties that are fantastic. And we're seeing, I'm going to use this as an example. I won't say the hotel name. Award-winning hotel, but struggling in revenue in certain areas. And I made some suggestions on changes that we can't change it because it's not Forbes standard. We won't get our 5 stars, but it's better. It's better for their guests. And this is what their guests are asking for. And so that's the challenge I think we have now with standards. You get so boxed in and everyone's freaked out that the inspector's here and we're going to get shopped and searching for the inspector versus focusing on the guests that are there in front of them and treating everyone as if they're an inspector and making sure that they're all enjoying that service because everyone's freaked out about losing a star or a diamond because it does have real world implications if you do lose one of those things and your revenue drops because, hey, oh, that's not a 5-star, 5-diamond anymore. People get fired over those things. So it's a tough thing. And not to hate on any of the Forbes and Michelin inspectors. I love you all. I was never that. I just think there's a way to kind of balance these things now to what guests really want.
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that it's the guest, even with Forbes, right? Even with this, The guests are the one that demand the standards. And that's who we ultimately have to please, because those are the people that are paying for it. And I do think that there's ways that we could say, hey, we're gonna change from maybe what the traditional delivery of this is. But I think when properties get so focused on the standard, right? And I think this goes back to why independents kind of have this little bit more wiggle room, or sometimes I feel like they get the advantage of, is they can look at the letter of the law and they can look at more maybe the spirit of it, right? Where they're able to say, no, okay, what is it that you really want? What is it that I really want out of a check-in? I want my room. That's really what I want out of check-in. Like, okay, all that other stuff we said, that's great, but the end result is I want my room, and I want the right room, and I want all those things. And so I love, Steve, as you're saying here, of like, what we have to do is look at the process, look at the guest experience, and then how do we design our standards and our flow to make sure that every guest every time has that intended experience. And that means, great, if you're not going to stop by the front desk, or you're not going to stop by this and you're just going to go straight to where you are, that's great. But what are the processes and the steps that we've put in place to make sure that that's feasible, and make sure that that system works for our guests, and that they don't feel this confusion of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I get there? That they feel so connected. And then if you are chasing the Forbes, or you are chasing the, AAA or Michelin or whatever those, whatever accolade it is that you may be, how do you entwine those elements of luxury? How do you make sure that those elements still exist for the guests to feel great? I mean, they may not stop by the front desk and get handed their spa, bookings, but they could be texted that, right? There could be an envelope waiting in the room that has that already, that showed, hey, I anticipated this, and the room was released with all of the things now inside the room that you need. And so I think what you've just really hit on so well, Steve, and hopefully that property is listening, that can say, you can do these things, and you can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak, in the fact that, but you have to think through it, and you have to design the process with the end in mind. Like Stephen R. Covey says, what's the end goal? What do we want? And then what are those steps, and how do we put it in place to really make sure that we're there, and then make sure everybody knows it and the team is all on board. So heck yes.
You nailed it.
So Steve, what do you think the most common standards failure you see, and that people don't even realize?
Failures, I think there's a lot of easy ones that are always missed. And I everywhere I go, this is my number one, and I see people mess this up, is you go to a restaurant or to a hotel and you spend your money, but there's no fond farewell. There's no thank you for coming or have a great day. I end up doing it. I do it on purpose a lot now, just for myself. Like, as I'm leaving, like, thank you all very much. Have a great day. I do it at Starbucks. I do it at, a hotel. I do it at a fancy restaurant. I do it all the time to see if that host will, I like saying, because I was trained to do it. I was brainwashed that way, but I find it just humanly nice. It's just a genuine nice thing to do. So that's number one. I think if you're a GM, you could just stand there and watch your host. They're going to be looking down at a computer, at the, the front desk people, whoever it might be, as their people are leaving. You want people making sure they're happy as they leave. Another one that would be interesting to see is in the rooms, because I'm now using this a lot, is like the linen and the terry and the sheets, things like that, that maybe is not just like an exact checkbox, but people may order something that's different than they're supposed to order. That's an important standard. It's like, people now can order things on Amazon so quickly, but it's not to the standard of what you're supposed to be buying. But because they were short and they didn't manage their inventory the right way, they're ordering things that don't belong, and all of a sudden you're sleeping on a rough sheets that weren't supposed to be there, when we worked so hard to find this standard of item for this room. So I think that's another thing, is really managing your inventory so that your standards don't drop because you're in a rush and you have to kind of fill in those things, because that's what guests will notice when they are laying down and trying those sheets or the towels that feel extra rough and not soft like you want them. And then one other one, as I'm just thinking here, really, is pool and beach during busy times. Like, this is the holiday season, right? Those standards tend to go out the window when there's no seats available around the pool deck and everyone's paying top dollar and imagine themselves alone on the pool deck, just like the image showed on the website, but it's slammed with kids running around and people fighting over cabanas and pool chairs and things like that. That can be a really challenging time when you have like this 1 hour rule and you're just like scooping people's stuff up and taking them to the towel hut. That can be rough. So I would think those are kind of my three for today. There's hundreds and hundreds of standards out there, but I think those are some that really just stick out to me recently as I'm looking around.
Steve, I'm so glad you brought up the fond farewell. It is my number one thing of like, look, if you want to transform your business from a hospitality world, focus on the goodbye. Everyone's focused on the hello. Everybody is. And I don't mean get rid of the hello.
No,
I mean, drill in on what are you doing at the end? What are we doing to say thank you? I hope to see you again. Please come back. Can I book your reservation now? Like, what is it that we're doing to make guests feel? I was talking with a hotel in New York, and I said, look, we have to remember that fond farewell is the first step in saying hello again. Right? When somebody walks out, and we're so quick to, okay, yeah, let me make this process of getting out of here easy. Right? Which is great. Like, I want to make sure checkout is seamless. I want to make sure that leaving the restaurant, closing the bill is nice and quick. But if we made it a priority to truly say thank you and focused on the departure, I think that these are the standards that will boost. We'll see a huge effect in revenue boosting. I mean, we're talking huge, right? People wanting to come back, and gosh, I just felt so recognized, because I think the farewell showcases how well did we get to know these guests, right? We went out to dinner the other day, and it was a birthday dinner, and it was so great because, funny enough, it was a little hibachi place that we go every year for my youngest's birthday, and he's only 6, so we've been like 5 times. He's been going since he was a baby, and same place, same everything, and it was so great. They turn everything off, they clear it over. And then they came back and they looked right at him and his table and said, thank you for bringing your family in for your birthday. Happy birthday. We really appreciate you coming in. I walked away, and it was just like that moment was purposeful and meaningful, and why it mattered so much. And so when you're a GM or you're a regional manager, I think a lot of the times the standards that we're focused on are, guest name usage, and we're doing all these things. But are we really connecting on those emotional standards, right? The ones that really matter are the ones that have the emotional impact. And I should say those matter because the other ones have been successful. Like, we don't get to win the emotional impact standards if we didn't greet you and we didn't do all the other essentials. But when we take that moment and really connect those emotionally impactful standards, that's where we win. That's where we get. And I think that's where GMs miss, right? Because unless you have a system in place, unless you really are good at that, unless your managers are on the floor acknowledging that and catching your team members doing that and recording it, that never makes it up, right? It never really bubbles up. And then what you end up seeing is guests in their comments being frustrated that they didn't feel recognized. Gosh, I came in, I spent 5 days at this place, and no one ever said thank you.
Yeah, as you guys were talking, of course, it's the tail end of the holidays, and we just got back from Corpus Christi, and so we were at the Omni on the water there in the bay, and I'm listening to you, and I can see the faces of the people who said hello, and it went from the valet to the front desk, and then as we were as we were there, we were looking for the restaurant, and we got lost, and this lady was pushing her housekeeping cart, I guess, and she came out of some room from somewhere. She made eye contact with me, immediately said, "Are you looking for the restaurant?" And she kind of walked me around the corner, me and my wife, and as we were leaving, I mean, front desk by, people between the front desk and the door by, the valet by, and that really does stick in your head.
Huge.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Way to go. Good job, Omni.
Good job, Omni. Yeah, they did a good job. Yeah,
because they cared about you. You felt cared for, and I think that's the key. Is that you can get so tied up into standards where it feels cold because, like, all right, I have to say this person's name 3 times. I have to hand them the keys with 2 hands, as my standard says. I have to do this, and you start getting caught up in this to make sure you hit your mark, versus like actually caring. Like, what did he say? I'm so focused on making sure I hit all these 75 standards I need to hit, versus, hey, here's a genuine care for you. Let me show you where the restaurant is because I know you're hungry.
Yeah.
And there was a wedding going on. So we came in and they were valeting all these wedding guests, and wedding guests were all over the place. And, and so the staff was just not frantic, but they were busy. They did a good job. So Steve, a lot of these standards are written down somewhere. I don't know how people, how do you remember all these standards, right? I mean, so there's a lot of risk there. Just like these standards, we have standards, but nobody knows where they are and they can't remember them and all that kind of thing. So what's the risk heading into, the turnover is probably still running at 80%, in a lot of these places. What's the risk there for staffing and training and guest expectations?
I think the risk is gigantic. We were talking about this a little bit at the start. Is you have so many people coming in, it's hard to build a culture, right? If you have 80% turnover, 50% or 30%, right? 30% of your team members are different all the time. You still need to make sure those people coming in understand the culture you want for your team. What are the core values they must have as they're on your team? What do they need to hit every single day, and who's training them, right? Because a lot of the times, I'll get to the SOP part, is like, hey, Adam, you've been here the longest, so you're going to train Steve, who just started today. And Adam has had bad habits all the time, but he just happens to be the star trainer because he's been there the longest. And he likes getting that extra $1.50 for the hours he's training people. And then the bad habits flow to me. And so, that makes it a challenge. And I was, I feel like I'm becoming the old man in the room sometimes, but I was the guy that was typing up. I'll never forget when I was opening a new hotel and the GM said, Steve, you need to create the SOPs for all of food and beverage. And I was like, all right, well, what do we have? He's like, I want someone to come in who has never worked here and be able to open up this book and be able to run every department. And to create something like that, when there was no online anything, it was all in a giant binder, right? Gigantic. And to expect people to read every single one without any system it's crazy. Right. And so now with technology and AI and all the new tools that are out here, I've used Yipy myself. I like using it a lot. And not just because I'm on here with you all. I think it's a great tool. Is how do we make this easier and smarter for people based off of the guest comments? What do we need to train up on now? How do we get someone up and running? And I think that is really the key now, because you can't just hand somebody. I like having it. I still like having an actual book, because I like reading actual books. I can never get into the Kindle or reading things online. I still think there's something to like a physical book, but that should not be, hey, here's our giant binder. Make sure to read it all over the next 10 days. And then we'll take a test to see if you remembered all 1,000 things, right? And then the test is, graded in front of them. Like, hey, go back and work on this and come back. And there's really not a great way to do it. And if you don't have a really good system. And so you really do risk a lot not having those standards. At the very least, like I go back to this, your core values. I know there used to be corny as heck to me when I was going through every different hotel had their core values and what they were. But now that I've built my own for my companies, we hire and fire based off of those core values. And if you don't show those things, it's how we start everything. And so you got to start from somewhere. So for the hotels that are already doing a great job, congratulations. I still think you need some tools in place to really harness technology and have it at your hand to see, like, how is everyone on your team doing with the standards? How is each department doing with their standards? How is each division doing with their standards? So it's easy to understand.
Man, amen. If I can, amen to that. And I think if I can chime in on the tail end of this, is like, standards have always been the bane of, I think, every organization's existence in some way, right? Because they're so critical. You have to have them, right? You have to define what is check-in, what is a host experience, what does cleaning the room look like at our hotel. You have to have these things. And I'm working with a hotel right now who just realizes, like, I need all of the standards from A to Z, at least kind of the outline, because we're in pre-opening. We got to figure this out and we got to open it up. And it's just like, we have to have these things in this industry. We have to define what our service flow is. And I think most hotels now, the only thing we know in our industry is, okay, go write the SOP, go type it up. Someone go sit in a hole and write these SOPs. We're going to put it into the binder, and no one's ever going to look at that ever again. And we're going to pull this out when we need to write somebody up, right? Like, okay, are we doing this? Or, heaven forbid, everybody quits. We got to retrain. But what ends up happening, like Steve was talking about, is, someone gets picked. Like, okay, you're the trainer. Go and figure it out. And how often do they reference that book? Almost never. I was trained out of the binder. I mean, it was like the binder. And it almost made it worse, right? Because it was so confusing, and it felt like so overwhelming and so much to do and everything. And it wasn't broken down into the bite-size elements of like, okay, how do I greet this guest? How do I present this menu? Or how do I, make sure that I give the guests the keys in the right way, or escort them to their room? What does that look like? And I think as we look into the future, and, we have tools, especially like Yipy, right? The idea is that says we need to make our standards more accessible to us. We need to make our standards more accessible to our team members, to the line level individuals that are delivering these experiences, that they can go back and they can check and they make sure that they're doing things right. Because circling back to our earlier conversation, my earlier statement, competence builds confidence. And it goes back to when I know what those 75 steps are in the back of my head, like I know them, I've practiced them, I'm confident and competent in executing those. Once they're mine and I've mastered them, now I can stop thinking about them and I can start infusing genuine sense of care. I can start infusing my personality. I can start infusing all the things that matter, so critically, because they're no longer a checklist. They're things that I know, and they all of a sudden are who I am, and it's who I exude. And those core values that, Steve, you just brought up, those are allowed to shine because we're not so worried about check, check, check. Okay, yes, yes, yes. But until we have that, until we know check, 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 yes, 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 we'll never actually get to the point where we can truly come out and say, here's me being authentic, because I'm so worried, right? So amen to that.
We like to keep this around 30 minutes. So let's wrap up with, a big issue. Labor turnover isn't new in the industry, of course, but onboarding costs and ramp up time are now a serious financial issue. So what are you guys seeing independents do differently when standards are treated as a system, as you mentioned, more so than the binder?
Yeah, look, it's going to get more expensive because I think you're going to have to keep paying top talent to join. And there's so many ways to make money now with the world that we live in, right? It's so hard. Like I tell hotel owners and developers and people who are management companies, people have so many options now. You can go make $40,000 a year on eBay and flip things and do all this stuff and drive for Uber and have the flexibility to make your own schedules. So first, I would say before we get to standards, like hotels and hospitality companies really have to keep that in mind. Like you have to create a place that people want to come work, right? And people want to come work at a place where they're going to get their best and work with other people who are doing their best. And everyone's being held accountable to the standards that are in place. Because as soon as you let a standard slip, that becomes the new standard. And then people don't want to be in places that, oh, he doesn't ever get written up, I'm always doing the right thing. And then that's a slippery slope to where things start falling apart quick. So that's why it's important to really have your standards and all your managers on the same team and having weekly meetings and understanding what the goals are for the company and then using those standards to get there and the core values to get to those goals. And so that's what I do in our company. We use a system called EOS, which we have weekly meetings for each team, and it's all tied to goals and it's tied back to our core values. And we love using it. And that's how we operate everything I do now. And I really encourage, if you're using that kind of system or another kind, you need something where everyone can see what everyone's working on, how it's tied to the goals that you have that year, and then using the standards that you have in place to achieve those goals. So if you don't have a system like that in place, you need to have it, or you're just kind of like swimming in open water. You don't know what direction you're going.
I mean, I think it goes back to if it's like operating without an accounting system, right? If we don't have track, money coming in, money going out, great. It's going to come in and it's going to go out either way. But when we can track where it's coming from and where it's going, and that's responsible business, right? Same thing with our operation, right? You've got a system that says, hey, these are our goals and our metrics. Are we hitting them? Are we doing that? We have a system where standards are then tracked and performance is measured, and we're able to say, are we hitting those? Or where are we focused? Where do we need to go? And I think that, as we look to the training and onboarding costs, it goes back to, one, are we creating a place where people want to stay, where people want to work, where they want to be developed? And are we making that reality possible, right? I can't imagine that there's a hotel out there that says, man, I hope no one stays here. From a guest, from an employee standpoint, we want to create a miserable working environment. No way. But the question is, are you going back and are you saying, what is your onboarding experience? Do you know? Is it easy to understand what the roles and responsibilities are when they get in? Is it easy to learn to like your job? I think that, the turnover begins with onboarding. Of if you show up to a place and that hotel or that restaurant, independent or not, if they take care of you and they show you the ropes the right way and they empower you and they strengthen you, that is one step closer to keeping you, right? And you're saying, gosh, I'm super happy. But how many people do you know start looking for a job the moment they have one? Like, okay, I got this job, now I got to go find another one because this one sucks, right? How do I get better? How do I go get something else? And I think that really when it comes down to it is, how do we use our systems? How do we obtain the systems that we need in order to operate more effectively? And then how do we use those systems to make sure that we're promoting our team members and we're helping them, empowering those team members, and making sure that they feel supported in every step of their journey.
Yeah.
Well said, Adam. Well said, man.
Yeah. That is, both you guys. I mean, holding people accountable across the board, same way. You got to know the standards. All the managers are got to be treating everybody the same way.
Yeah.
Because you don't always get that. Then you get this weird, I'm not supported, I don't want to be here. Like, yeah, you see that. I remember working service jobs, yeah, that's rough, and I know I've said this before, but my wife went back to school the same time as my kids did. So I was like, I can only send 2 people to college at a time. So she became a shift manager at Starbucks because they paid for your tuition, and it, well-run organization, but they have their problems as well culturally. She, after about 3 years there, it was like, it was starting to run her out, and so it's really important. It's good stuff, and you got to have a system, and you got to be able to be refer to it, and got to be flexible. It's got to move with the times.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Got to.
Well, as always, great conversation, gentlemen. Let's wrap up. Been at this about 30 minutes. Thank you for joining us, Steve. And again, where your property again on Instagram? What is that?
It's called Baya Miami. It's BAYA Miami. So if you haven't checked it out, make sure to check it out. We just launched our early reservation system, so you can become a VIP and sign up for it. You'll see it in the link on the Instagram page, which we're excited about. And then can I do a selfless plug on with you guys?
Yeah.
If you haven't yet, get the book Hospitality Unlocked, available on Amazon.
Well, there you go.
Filled with information from 75 of the best hospitality leaders about their journey and the advice they would give their younger selves. So,
you know what? And let me add to that. I'm literally looking over the top of my computer right now at Hospitality Unlocked by Steve Turk on my bookshelf. And let me tell you, I've read the whole thing twice, actually. Really enjoyed it. I've referred to it often as we build Yipy. It's been something that I've gone to actually and said, what are the problems? What are the things? What do people want? Fantastic book. If you're a hotelier, please make sure you pick it up. Steve, if people want to get a hold of you, ask you questions, pick your brain or do business with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, look, I say the best place to connect with me and to really interact is LinkedIn. I'm on there every day talking to, all the people around the globe. And if you want to reach out to me here via email, feel free to. It's steve@turkhv.com.
Awesome. Thanks.
Fantastic. How about you, Adam? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, come on over. Come see what we're doing at Yipy. Same thing. Best way to get a hold of us is come to the Yipy website, yipy.io, and Adam at yipy.io.
There you go.
I'd love to help out with anybody with standards needs.
Yep. Fantastic. All right, gentlemen, let's wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks for
great
having me.
day. Happy New Year, everyone.